Hello, this is Amanda Ninji. In this video, I'm sharing how I sketched a simple idea and turned it into a full illustration for a custom wallpaper design. I will walk you through sketching, refining the character, adding font details, designing the layout, and finally bringing it all together with color. If you love drawing on iPad, creating cute animals, or designing for wallpapers and stationery, this video is for you. Let's get started. Let's start by opening a new canvas. The size I'm using is 2388 by 1668 pixels, which is just a typical size for my iPad wallpapers, but you can also use it for laptop. I think I set the DPI to 400 for high quality resolution. Now I'm using the grainy sketch brush from my Procreate brush set, which is my typical rough sketching brush. I forgot to film it, but I just wanted to mention that. For this stage, I usually avoid the color black and go for a darker reddish color to keep the sketch softer and nature. I like to start by sketching the face first. It helps motivate me to keep going on with the rest of the illustration. I already had an idea in mind, inspired by this reference photo of a cat lazily laying on a bench, but instead of a cat, I decided to draw a rabbit because, well, I just love rabbits. I use an app called vizref for reference photos, and it's honestly amazing, definitely worth checking it out. After finished the face, I moved on to the body and took a quick look at the reference to guide the pose and gesture. This is the first round of my rough sketch, where I mainly relied on the reference photo. I initially imagined the rabbit holding both hands near her face, but since I never fully settled on my first sketch, I like to duplicate it and Procreate and experiment with different options to see if there's a better way to improve it. I also took a look at a previous iPhone wallpaper design I made featuring the same rabbit character. I wanted to make sure the new sketch stays consistent with the original design. As I move into the second round of sketching, I really focused on refining the details. For this kind of illustration, even a small mistake, like one line being off, can throw off the whole design. So it's important to take your time during the sketching phase and make sure everything looks just right. If there's anything I'm not happy with, I will experiment using the tools and Procreate. For example, I use Liquify and the selection tool to transform parts of the rabbit, like resizing or adjusting certain areas, to make the pose and gesture look even cuter. It's all about experimenting until I get a design that I am happy with. After the second round, I moved on to the third version of the rough sketch. Unfortunately, I didn't film this part, but I gave it another try and ended up liking the results. I decided to go with this version, and once I decided on that, I grouped the first 3 sketches together since I didn't need them anymore. Then I duplicated the third version and began refining it. This way I could keep all the original rough sketch intact while working on the final details. As I was refining the sketch, I felt like there was a bit of empty space between the rabbit's hands, so I decided to add a cute little carrot. I thought it would bring in some extra charm and cuteness. When I add details that I'm not sure about, I like to create a new layer for testing. This way I can experiment without risking my final line art. I used a vibrant red for the carrot, and once I saw it in place, I loved it. It's just so adorable to picture the rabbit holding the carrot, so I decided to keep it in the final design. Now that we have the first character design ready, I wanted to add another version of the rabbit, this time in a different pose, to give the wallpaper some extra fun. Since I was creating a wallpaper for my laptop, I thought it'd be fun to just draw a rabbit working with the laptop. So I jumped straight into rough sketching that idea to see how it would fit with the rest of the design. Notice that I use Procreate's Liquify and Transform tools to experiment with different proportions and poses a lot. I zoom in and out frequently as well, making sure the character looks consistent and stays true to the original design. As I was sketching, I felt the rabbit looked too relaxed. Since I wanted her to motivate me, I decided to raise her arm for a more energetic pose. I loved how it turned out. It really brought her to life. Now that the two main designs are ready, it's time to add some secondary elements to the illustration. These smaller designs will add a bit of extra charm and fill out the wallpaper nicely. I added some text as part of the design. I wrote "just do it," a simple motivational message I often remind myself of when procrastinating. Along with the text, I also sketched a small rabbit profile illustration to tie everything together. Now, with the two main designs and two smaller secondary elements, I'm happy with how everything is coming together. Then I'm brainstorming how to organize my desktop files and deciding the layout for my wallpaper. I thought about creating different zones, one for personal items, like my wedding photos from earlier this year, another for work files, and a daily essentials area for frequently used projects. There's also a sort out later zone for things I haven't organized yet. Now that we've decided on different zones for the wallpaper, it's time to resize and position the illustrations. I always like to finalize the size of my rough sketches before moving on to the line art. In Procreate, if you use a defined brush like my fuzzy liner brush and resize the illustration afterward, it can create blurry areas, which I want to avoid. So in this stage, I'm moving the rough sketches around, resizing them, and placing them according to the layout we've planned. With the rough sketches resized, I lowered the opacity to around 10%. That's why they are very light and barely visible. And then I'm using my fuzzy liner brush from my Procreate brush pack. I started creating the detailed line art, tracing over the rough sketches to refine the illustrations. If you'd like to practice this step, I'm considering creating a product that includes my rough sketches and the fuzzy liner brush as a pack. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in seeing on my website. Next, I will be tracing over my rough sketches to refine them into clean line arts. For lines on the outer edges of the illustration, I use a slightly larger brush size, while for lines inside of the design, I switch to a smaller brush size. Drawing line art is actually very relaxing. It doesn't take much brain energy, since all the creative decisions have already been made during the sketching phase. Sometimes I even watch TV series while working on the line arts. But don't underestimate it. It still requires a steady hand. Even though Procreate smooths out your lines, it's still a skill that takes practice. That's why I'm considering creating a product with my rough sketches and the fuzzy liner brush, so that you can practice drawing line art yourself. When I'm drawing line art, I often like to zoom in to make sure all the lines are smooth and precise. Another tip I use is working with layers, especially when drawing objects with overlapping elements. For example, when drawing the rabbit's water glass, I placed the glass on a separate layer above the rabbit's line art. This way, I could erase or adjust the glass without affecting the rabbit's line art underneath. These are really techniques that I think help me to keep everything neat and streamlined. I think drawing line art can feel a bit repetitive sometimes. It's mostly just tracing what is already there, but it's also oddly relaxing. Okay, now before I move into coloring, I immersed all the line art into one layer. And if your line art doesn't have any gaps or disconnected lines, you can set the layer to reference in Procreate, which makes it super quick to fill in base colors. But if there are small breaks in the lines, like mine often have, you see when I try to drag a color into the area I want to fill, it doesn't work as intended. To solve this, I copied the original line art and worked on the duplicate layer, connecting all the disconnected areas. Once everything was fixed, I set this new line art layer to reference. This step makes it so much easier and faster to fill in the base colors accurately. While I was working on the coloring process, I realized I missed filming parts of it. In the future, I plan to create more detailed step-by-step tutorials on coloring techniques, using layers, and refining illustrations in Procreate. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.